My name's Dave Weber, and I'm a teacher. I love what I do. I've been doing it for 27 years in schools in both Canada and the United States, and I enjoy most days. I'll go with every day, but we all know that it's really most days. And I think the part that I like the most is the ability that we have as teachers to impact kids. I teach in a school that is 100% free and reduced lunch, and neither one of my kids' parents could have gone to college. So I teach a very underrepresented, underserved population, and they're college bound. And the number one thing I think that I teach these kids is confidence. So I teach high school mathematics. Okay, no bad reactions, that's good. I think I teach 90% confidence, 10% math, because without the confidence, my kids aren't doing the math. They're just not. And so I need to get them to a point where they're willing and able and maybe even anxious to get to math. So what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about maybe where teaching has been, where we are now, what kids are going through, what's the context, and then unfortunately or fortunately, I'm going to make you do some math. So if that makes you very tense, we'll get through it. You're good. We're good. We're good. Do I have any math teachers in the room? Excellent. So I might need a little bit of help from you all. If people are struggling, you can help me get to them. All right, so where have we come from? So these would be defined as the good old days, where you have the teacher sitting up front or standing up front delivering a lesson. Kids are in rows, probably seem very discipline-oriented. And I know people call those the good old days. I'm not so sure for me as a teacher who wants to have an impact on kids how good those days really were. I might be getting to them academically, but I don't know if I'm really reaching them or sending them any other kinds of messages along the way. Then we got into a little bit of technology. Very little. So there's the teacher with the TV in front. Still pretty traditional. She's putting together all the lessons. She's the one delivering all the content. But maybe now trying to reach kids a little bit more where they're at, looking for something that might have a little bit more interest to them. And then along came the open classroom, which is much more child-centered. Kind of looks like a free-for-all. I see kids facing in all kinds of different directions. I don't even know where the teacher is in this thing. How much impact is going on in there? I don't know. I don't know yet. But I like the idea that kids now are maybe a little bit more in charge of their own learning. But some days that's kind of how maybe you and I feel. Kids are just all over the place, and I don't really know what it is I'm supposed to be doing. So teaching has come a long way because I think we started in a very traditional style, and now the style seems to be changing. And what is it changing to? And I'm hoping maybe to answer that question today. In terms of kids, what are they going through? So what will a student's future look like? So the U.S. Department of Labor says that 65% of today's kids will be in jobs that haven't even been invented yet. So there's something called a chief listening officer. And what they do is they scour the internet for a company, picking up on what are people saying about our products. They're listening on social media to what people say about the products that they offer. And of course, before social media, none of those jobs even existed. So what's waiting for our kids? We don't even know. That's part of it. The other part that they say is that the average person will have 12 to 15 jobs by the time they're 40. I've had one. I've been in 3 schools, but I'm just a teacher. And I don't say that lightly. So I think part of the issue is, are we preparing kids for this future, and how are we preparing them for this future? I think we're asked as teachers now to do more than we ever have been asked to do before. And then on top of this are the issues that the kids are going through. So we talk a lot about in my school in the state of California, trauma-informed care, recognizing that kids are going through things at home that impact their ability to learn in the classroom. And what are those things, and how do we help, or how do we teach in spite or despite those activities? Just the general characteristics of new generations of students. They don't think, act, want the same things necessarily that my generation did, and then how do I respond to that knowing that it's not my background, it's not my generation. Standardized testing, which is very, very large, looms large in this country, schools being ranked, compared, put on probation, etc., because of their standardized test scores. There's a lot of pressure on teachers to get kids to a certain point. And then lastly, the whole idea of college readiness, that we want kids to be college ready on top of all of these other things. Whereas in the traditional classroom in the 50s, not every kid was going to college, and that was okay. Right? So things have changed, not just for teachers, but also for students. And I would say the number one thing in all this is that teachers matter. We have always mattered. we are the ones who will make a huge difference in these kids' lives. We're also the ones who have to deal with all the things that I just spoke about. So I want to show you just a really brief video of how I think kids learn best. Sorry that it's so grainy, but the message is still the same. Couple of lessons in there, I'm sure. So inquiry-based really is an active activity focused on questioning, critical thinking. Maybe that kid needed a little bit more critical thinking and maybe some questioning before he made that last little jump. And problem solving. So it's an active learning strategy, very different than the traditional styles that we saw at the beginning of this. And also, for students who don't feel so confident, that learning something new can often feel like swimming upstream, as maybe some of you are about to experience in the next 5 minutes or so. And if it's not swimming upstream, then maybe it's climbing out of a super deep hole. Right? All right, so what we're going to do is, on the chairs around you, there is a Discovering Exponents activity. You can work alone, or you can work with a person beside you. We've got enough, I think everybody can do it by themselves. It's really worth it if you try it on your own and see what happens. You do not have to hand this in. There will not be a quiz later, so we're good. On the Discovering Exponents activity, I just want to remind you of a couple things. So one, what is an exponent? What does it mean? So 2 to the 4 means 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, so there's 4 of them. What you're going to do is you're just going to follow the pattern as you complete the activity for all 3 columns. When you've done the columns, then you can move on to the questions that are at the bottom. What I would tell you is that just follow the pattern, and if you think you need to write a decimal, don't write it as a fraction instead. If you get stuck, feel free to ask, but again, the pattern will be established there. So why don't you get to that, and I'll come around and check in with people as much as I can. So this is what you should have seen. People always make the same mistakes, and it's really no big deal because we have an idea of what an exponent is, and this challenges that. And that's the point. Is that it challenges a definition that we've held for a really, really long time, which is the little number in the corner says how many times you multiply that thing by itself. Well, 2 to the 0 doesn't mean you have no 2's. So the definition kind of breaks down a little bit. Negative exponents, even worse. In math, we have fractional exponents. 2 to the half wouldn't be a half of a 2, and you just draw the little loop. That's another issue altogether. We can talk later on when we're done if you really want to know, so why does this work? I'm more than happy to have the mathematical conversation with you about it. But I'm just wondering if you can tell what the pattern is. What have you learned about 0 exponents and negative exponents? Yes, anything to the 0 equals 1. Nice. Did you know that before? Maybe a long time ago. Certainly not recently. And what do negative exponents do? Yeah, they make fractions. That's very surprising to people because most people put -2, -4, -8, -16. It's a very common thing to do. And so the goal here is to teach kids this so that they can come up with their own rules. I don't tell them the rules because when I tell them, it's not active, they sit passively and wait, and they don't necessarily understand where it comes from. The ultimate goal, if you got to that point, would be that you come up with rules that maybe look like that. This is the hard part. This is where I as a teacher really need to come in. The kids generally recognize a pattern once they get the right one. And then it's a matter of how do I write it mathematically. That's good stuff. That's a place for a math teacher. I can show you the notation, I can show you the conventions. Those things are easy to get to. But in mathematics especially, lots of what we look at is actually just pattern recognition. So what I would say when kids do this activity is, when you got that right, how did that feel? Sat up a little taller, shoulders went down, smiled a little bit. Most kids, when they get things right, feel good. And my hope is that we get to repeat that feeling over and over again. That is the impact I want to have on kids. Because if I told them the answer, and just gave them the rules, would they have had the same feeling? No. And then would they have understood the rule? No. So I think we have two things going on here. One is the mathematics. I need kids to understand what they're learning. And that goes true in any subject area. And again, if I can do it in math, then you certainly can do it in your subject area if it's not math. But we also want kids to improve their belief in themselves and their self-concept. And I don't think they get a chance to do that by sitting and waiting for things to happen to them. They need to be active. So to me, that's the Kapow. That's the impact that you can have in a classroom. So, Confucius probably said it best, that if you tell people things, they're likely to forget. But if you involve them, then they're certainly going to at least begin to understand, if not understand fully. And the beauty of inquiry is that I can get to the kids who really need my help, and the kids that don't need my help, I have things for them. So now I'm really personalizing and getting to kids who need me most. Darling Hammond had a study out in 2008 where she talks about how active learning practices can overcome most obstacles, including student background and prior achievement. I can undo poor achievement by helping kids by teaching this way. And imagine a kid who is math phobic, maybe some of you who are math phobic, seeing a pattern, being able to write it down, getting that sense, wait a sec, I can do this. That's a lesson for a lifetime. Maybe even more so than just the mathematics itself. They also said that we need to teach kids not just what to learn, but how to learn. So I've given you now a strategy. My guess is if you have kids who are in high school, a bunch of you hopefully will go home and show your kids, but if they need help, or if the kid needs help, I can have them go through the strategy again. Okay, let's follow the pattern again. How did you get there if they don't remember the rules specifically? Right? So part of it's mathematical, but part of it's also very affective. How can I affect a child in the most positive way to get them to see themselves in a different light, especially for someone who teaches a subject like mathematics? Let me give you a couple more examples. This is a really easy one in mathematics, teaching kids the formula for the surface area of a sphere, which is a really boring thing, to be perfectly honest. But here we have kids tracing around oranges or clementines or cuties, whatever you want to call them, and then peeling them and filling in as many circles as they can, and it fills in 4 circles perfectly. And the area of one circle is pi r squared, so it fills in 4 of them. That's 4 pi r squared. That happens to be the formula for the surface area of a sphere. As opposed to telling them, having them discover that idea for themselves. It's a very powerful notion. In history, if we want kids to figure out or to understand, so why did Roosevelt oppose the segregation of San Francisco schools? Aside from telling them, give them the resources they need to, give them opposing opinions even, have them figured out and tell you. The traditional paradigm in the North American school is, I'll do it first, and then we'll all do it together, and then you can go do it. And this turns that around. You do it first. We'll all discuss, and if you need me, I'll be there to help and maybe guide you or show you what you might find in a textbook instead. Again, I'm not an expert in history or art, but even in art, I imagine, if you want to have kids figure out the differences between Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, give them examples of each. Have them tell you what it is. Problem solving occurs in every subject area that we have. And when the kids figure it out, 1, they'll remember it better, but 2, they'll understand it. 3, it feels good to know that what you've been doing actually is A, correct, and B, has meaning. So to me, that's a huge impact. Let me just give you some pointers, some suggestions. Like, give yourself time to prepare. As a teacher, that's where the time comes from, up front, what you're front-loading with the kids with the activities. I think you also got to make sure that it's directed at exactly the right level. If it's too hard, you've lost them. If it's too easy, you've lost them, because it's too easy. You got to get right in the middle and then always have something for them to do afterwards. And try to incorporate discovery into lessons. But I think all these things begin with really good questions. And the more questions you ask, then the more questions the kids will begin to ask. And so my big question this past year has been, what do you wonder? Because in math, kids aren't allowed to wonder. So what do you wonder? And I have a big wonder wall where we put up all these really crazy questions that kids ask. And they start to feel proud of, wait a sec, my question made it up there. Because they're good questions. Jo Boaler, who's a kind of a little guru now in mathematics, she talks about a lot of brain research and says that when you make mistakes, that's when your brain is growing. So synapses fire, the brain grows. This is a very important time for kids. So we don't want to avoid the mistakes, which I know that's what kids want to do. We want to celebrate them. We want to encourage them. We want kids to make them because that's how you learn. I always tell my kids, how'd you learn that the stove was hot? Your parents told you, but you didn't necessarily believe them. You had to go touch it and figure it out for yourself. Right? And this works well in mathematics. I think it's true in absolutely any subject area. So this is Paul Lockhart, who wrote a really cool little PDF called The Mathematician's Lament. And what he says is if you deny students the opportunity to engage in those types of activities, you've denied them a whole lot of things. I love how he says to cobble together their own explanations and proofs, to be wrong. And in so doing, you've denied them mathematics itself, because math isn't a bunch of rules. Language arts is not just a bunch of rules. History is not just a bunch of facts and dates and figures. That there's more to it. And so when we teach kids this way, they understand that the subject is more than just what we've said it is. I think you also deny students the opportunity to feel good, to build confidence, to experience that growth mindset, to persevere and persist. These are lifelong lessons that we can impart to kids. But I think you also deny yourself those exact same things. That you as a teacher can have a growth mindset. That you as a teacher can increase your self-confidence. Because every time a kid learns to believe in themselves, I believe in myself a little bit more as well. We matter. We make a difference in kids' lives. And we can do it every single day. It doesn't have to be the extra time spent tutoring. It doesn't have to be the extra hours we spent with a kid. It can be in a lesson every day of the week. Because remember, in order to succeed, we must first believe that we can succeed. And I think that holds as true for you as it does for the students.